Hello and most welcome to 1283. We will continue the trodden path that we took last lecture, 1282, and finish off the paper by Smolin and Verde. And as I said previously, I think this understanding of this can be very helpful. I would say it's an absolute predisposition to understand what is your current or what is your Newtonian take on time within yourself. This is not a global thing, that is, it's enough to understand it in the regular sense. What you need to understand is, how do I understand now? You need to find that. That is, so to speak, the working area. This is where everything is happening. I will just read the last paragraph once more to give fluency to the reading. The correspondence is fundamental to quantum theory, but it cannot be the whole story, because it does not dictate when the two rules are applied. When are the amplitudes of quantum history summed over and superposed? And when is there a real event where only probabilities are summed? Are these consequences of external interactions, as in von Neumann's two rules for measurement assert? Our proposal fills in this gap in a very simple way that uses no additional structure, because in our proposal for the distinction between definite and indefinite is a primitive that does not require further explanation. When making a prediction about the future, sum over amplitudes and then take the absolute value squared of the sum to get probabilities. When processing records from the past, take the absolute value squared of the amplitude for each history, and then add the resulting probabilities. Five, the frame of reference for an observer in a present moment. We have given a perspective on the past and future in terms of indefinite becoming definite. To realize the implications of this change, we introduce a new time coordinate, and indeed a new kind of reference frame that parameterizes what an observer in a present moment would experience. This is a family of time coordinates, one for every present moment in the succession of such moment, which gives a special indication to the present moment. Because of the flow of time, the present moment keeps becoming, creating new events which become present just as the formerly present become past. Just as one has to keep translating in space to keep the inertial observer at the origin of the spatial coordinates, we have to continually translate the present moment observer into the future to keep them at the temporal original, which is tau zero. We need to introduce two classes of time coordinates. Clock times t are readings on a physical inertial clock, which is not part of the system being studied. There are an infinite number of clock times which, in the absence of gravity, are related to each other by Poincaré transformations. They all express the principle of inertia, namely that they can each declare themselves to be at rest and measure all motion relative to them. Present moment relative times indicated by tau. An observer in each of the succession of present moments can construct one of these. Each one is defined so that tau in its present moment vanishes. Let us assume that we have chosen an inertial clock T. The reading of that clock in a particular present moment distinguishes that moment and is called T0. We can then define tau equals T0 minus T. The reason we need two kinds of time coordinates is that quantum physics is causal but not deterministic. The causality is represented by the present moment coordinates, which build the current previous moments on the previous ones. This is the true action of dynamics in quantum physics. The basic idea of using tau to measure time is that as we evolve through a succession of present moments, T always evolves so that it is always clear which time is the present moment. It is the one in which tau equals 0. The clock time connects the system to the rest of the world without imposing determinism. We note that T evolves in the opposite sense of T. Suppose we start out in a present moment T1, which is before T0. That is, the present moment indicated by T equals T0 is then in our future. In terms of clock time, T0 remains fixed in the future and our clock increases, which gives a sense that we are rushing towards that future. When we use 1 to transform to the tau coordinate, it is like transforming to a moving frame. To capture the idea that an inertial observers feel no motion. The present moment coordinates starts in the past of that present moment and sits stationary at tau equals 0, while the future rushes towards it. We are to a certain extent, but not completely, in a circumstance analogous to that of a local inertial observer. They construct an hypothesis as to the world far from them, using only the information they have locally, which comes from the light signals they send out and receive, at times measured by their local clock. It is instructive to imagine what it would be like to live in a world that ran on present moment time. The present time would always be tau equals 0. We wouldn't need clocks to tell us that the present moment would always be now. But the times assigned to future events would not be static, as they would always be counting down to the particular present moment when they would happen and emerge from the indefinite to the definite. Rather than a living by a clock which always ran to orient ourselves to a static calendar. The calendar would indicate a complexity of countdowns, each evolving towards its moment. Closing remarks. Our proposal is not subjective or relational. Some people who embrace relational approaches to quantum mechanics will regard our existence, no matter how definitive for us, as indefinite to them. We do not make any such claim. We propose that definite is an objective and universal status, which is why our proposal requires a choice of configuration space or basis. There are several ways our proposal can be read. One can read definite and indefinite as epistemological terms, stating that the status of the knowledge we have of a physical system. Or one can give the distinction an ontological reading, or we can, following Aristotle, think about the distinction between the definite and the indefinite a distinction between two ways of being. A potential way of being contrasted with an actual way of being. So finally, we define the present, past, and future in terms of the transition from indefinite to definite as follows. Reality, which is to say the momentary present, consists of nothing but flashes of transitions from indefinites to definites, which persist for an instant in their definiteness and then are gone. This has happened before, but once something is definite, it's done its job and it's gone. There is no past, because once an event has done its job, it plays no further role. The future does not concretely exist. It contains indefinite quantities and that have yet to be rendered definite and hence existing. Indefiniteness can persists as such, but without existing. This is the fate of the future. By a resolution and embrace of a definite, it briefly has existence, then is gone. There is nothing under our feet. The past is gone. And with that we say thank you to Smolin and Verde. This is also, of course, influenced by Carlo Rovelli, Stuart Kaufman, and a name I don't think you are familiar with, João Maguejo, whose name defies pronunciation. Well, here I end the part and my reading of the quantum mechanics of the present. There will be a link to this paper in the description. I will spend the last half with an article, How Science Catches Up when it comes to Alexander technique. Which is also pretty much recent. In August 2018, Dr. Rajal Cohen was a featured speaker for one of 3 plenary sessions at the International Alexander Technique Congress in Chicago. Her talk, Science Catches Up, provides an overview of current research on the phenomena and concepts that underlie the Alexander technique. She discusses research from her lab as well as the work of other scientists studying the Alexander technique, while making connections to broader findings in motor control, neuroscience, and psychology. She wrote as the following. I have spent the last 18 years trying to understand Alexander technique from a scientific perspective, using insights from AT, which are the way I'm going to put the acronym for Alexander technique, from AT to inspire testable hypotheses and testing those hypotheses. It is now over 100 years since Friedrich Matthias Alexander published his first book, and scientists are finally asking questions where insights from Alexander technique can make a difference. Before examining some relevant modern research, let's review a few key aspects of how science works. Peer review and replication. No matter how careful and objective scientists try to be, we all need outside perspectives on our work. Peer review and replication are 2 of the most important parts of the scientific process. Here's how it works. After I write an article, I submit it to a peer-reviewed journal for consideration. The editor glances at it and decides whether to reject it immediately or send it out for review. It often takes months to gather reviews from willing volunteers with suitable expertise. A paper could be accepted or rejected at this stage. More typically, reviewers will request specific changes, which might include things like run another study or reanalyze data. Multiple rounds of review are common. Most published researchers also serve as reviewers. And most of us try to provide constructive feedback that will lead to a better final published paper. Any paper not published in a peer-reviewed scientific journal has not passed this essential test. Even with peer review, a single study is never enough. No matter how careful the research, it is still inevitably based on the laws of statistics that many published results are wrong. Therefore, findings need to be replicated before they can be trusted. Other researchers must run the same or similar study to confirm or not confirm the original findings. It takes many peer-reviewed studies before an approach is recognized by mainstream scientific organizations like the National Institutes of Health. Some perspective. In August 2018, I entered Alexander technique into a PubMed.gov search and got 96 hits. Then I entered Tai Chi and got 1279 hits. That is over 13 times as many peer-reviewed studies. The NIH just recently started promoting Tai Chi on their website. So don't hold your breath for 80 to show up there anytime soon. Progress and change. The overall goal of science is to keep expanding the boundaries of knowledge. Influential studies provide a foundation for subsequent research to build on incrementally. Alexander's work was not developed within this framework, which creates challenges for scientists who want to study it. For instance, Frank Pierce Johns did interesting studies that did not influence the science of human motor function or behavior. Jones's 1965 study showed that people stand up from a chair different with an Alexander teacher's hand-on guidance than without that guidance. But the study is almost never cited in the sit-to-stand literature. Why? Jones conducted his studies 20 years before anybody was studying how people get out of chairs. Nobody was interested in the problem to which he was offering a solution. 55 years later, there is a large body of literature about how people get out of chairs. Entering sit-to-stand at School or Goggle yields over 27,000 results. Only recently has enough groundwork been laid to create a context where questions about Alexander's ideas make sense. Scientific models change over time, evolving as new tools are developed and new evidence is acquired. Alexander wrote his books about 100 years ago, when psychology and neuroscience were in their infancy, and scientists were just figuring out how synapses and reflexes work. Science has come a long way since then, and our field has not kept up. One thing we need to move past is our tendency to describe our works in terms of reflexes. Reflexes are inborn, mostly spinal and nearly instantaneous. They occur as automatic, involuntary responses to stimuli. Scientists like simple, elegant theories that can explain a lot of phenomena. If you could successfully explain all behavior in terms of reflexes, that would be a great victory. However, reflexes cannot account for things like learning or the involvement of higher levels of the nervous system, nor can they explain complex voluntarily or self-generated movements. Reflexes were the hot new thing when Alexander was first developing his work. 100 years later, people still use reflexes to explain the Alexander technique in ways that are unsupported by current science. For instance, when Magnus discovered the tonic necks reflex, the Alexander technique community got excited. But this is a tiny inconsistent effect in neurologically healthy adults. Turn your head to the right and notice that your arms did not go flying off in different directions, nor would it be useful to you if they did. This, I have to put in parentheses, this is a reflex you can find among infants. So when they turn their neck to the left or the right, the arm comes flying off. Furthermore, some AT teachers talk about an anti-gravity reflex. However, current science says there is no such thing. We maintain balance in the face of gravity using continuous information from many sources. The vestibular system, vision, muscles in the ankle, pressure sensors in the bottom of the feet. All this information is combined with flexible weighting according to context. It is much more complicated, flexible, and interesting behavior than a reflex would allow. Relevant fields of study. Kinesiology, rehabilitation, exercise science, biomechanics, motor control. There is a bundle and they mainly overlap to some extent. If 80 principles are true, they should be discoverable by researchers outside of 80. However, they may be described differently and dispersed among different scientific fields, including psychology, neuroscience, and biomechanics. The scientific field that covers the overlap of all these areas is motor control. The associated applied research areas are exercise science, kinesiology, and rehabilitation science. These are fields where you will find research about intention, inhibition, stress, mindfulness, coordination, posture, balance, and movement. The remainder of this article is organized according to a chart, and it has lots of columns. I'll try to sort of verbally depict some of it. Positions of mechanical advantage could be found in biomechanics. Use effect function, which is dynamic postural tone. Deep versus surface muscles. Direction can be found within intention and motor imagery. The latter one is mostly interesting. Primary control, neck physiology. Inhibition is called inhibitory control. Endgaining, motor preparation. Faulty sensory appreciation, sensation versus perception, body schema, proprioception. The force of habit, satisficing versus optimizing. Unity of the self, embodied cognition, neural circuitry. The principle that some positions are more mechanically advantageous than others is closely related to ergonomics, which is basically the smart application of biomechanics to work life. We often look askance at ergonomics because we have seen terrible products marketed as ergonomic. Ergonomics has one of the same problems Alexander technique has, which is that nobody controls who can use the term nonetheless mainstream biomechanics based ergonomics recommendations are consistent with some of what we teach. That's because the principles are true. They exist beyond us. In fact, they are based on Isaac Newton's laws of mechanics. Newton's third law states that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. Gravity is acting on us constantly. If we are not actively falling, it is because of upward forces that are exactly matched to gravity. However, gravity is a field force acting on our whole body, while the upward forces are contact forces transmitted through our bones. Therefore, putting the bones directly between our mass and the ground allows the forces to equalize with minimum effort. Taking this further, weight is a measure of force. The effective weight of a body part is a function of its horizontal distance from the skeletal support. Therefore, when the mass of the body is not aligned over the body support, The muscles and connective tissues are subject to more stress. Alexander teaches don't focus exclusively on alignment, but we do try to get people to spend more of their time in mechanically advantageous positions. If you look up head back and down in a scientific database, you will not find anything. However, if you search for forward head posture, there is quite a bit of research. In this case, forward means excessively forward in space relative to the spine. You can also search hypokyphosis, which means excessive curvature in the upper spine. Both body shapes are associated with poor health outcomes, including neck pain, jaw pain, carpal tunnel syndrome, headache, and increased fall risk and mortality. There thus is strong support overall for the idea of mechanical advantage. I think we'll terminate 1283 there. To be continued. Still clouded. I think it got a bit warmer and therefore it's even more clouded. But still it's clearish weather. More normal November temperatures than previously, but still a bit too warm. Thank you very much and have a very pleasant afternoon. Bye bye.